When most of us think of the face of those experiencing homelessness, hunger, and other forms of insecurity in America's cities, the face is almost always a man's. But what about women and children who've been dislodged from the community because of abuse, fatherless or motherless homes, often connected to addiction or mental illness? Who is helping them? How do you help without adding to pain or treating them like a number or statistic? On today's State of Independence, you'll hear about one of Pennsylvania's most successful organizations, Bethesda Mission in Harrisburg, that is meeting the needs of men, women, and children in extraordinary ways. Stay with us. Cindy Mallow is the Director of Development for an organization that's been meeting the needs of heart, body, mind, and yes, soul since 1914. That's a long time. Even more encouraging is that Bethesda Mission doesn't rely on local, state, or federal tax dollars for any of the services they provide. Listen to this. On an average month, Bethesda Mission shelters some 60 men every night and more in colder months, serves over 5,000 meals, provides over 17,000 pounds of food. That's without counting the medical and dental care, special assistance for military veterans, and a state-of-the-art shelter that helps countless women and their children. And that's before we've even talked about Bethesda's Youth Center, helping dozens every year make it to graduation. And everything is done in the name of Christ. Before I introduce you to Cindy, watch this.
My parents were good people. I grew up in South Carolina. I ended up losing my father. My father died on the operating table. I ended up losing my job after about 10 years. And I turned to the street for some comfort. I made bad choices in the street. I ended up doing 7 numbers, 22 years incarcerated, off and on. It wasn't that I was a bad person. I was just chasing a lifestyle that I thought loved me. I knew that I needed something, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. But what I ended up doing during that last bit was something different for me. Instead of hanging out in the yard and all of that, I went to school. And I had a cousin that came to Harrisburg from Philadelphia. And he always told me, he said, "Cuz, if you ever need me, call me. And I'll get you down here and we'll try to work on, getting you some recovery." So when I came down, he met me at the bus station. I didn't know that in the morning he was gonna wake me up early and we was gonna drive over here to 6th and Riley Street to Bethesda Mission. That was nowhere in the plan. That morning he woke me up and said, "Come on, cuz, I'm gonna take you somewhere where I got my help at, and I believe they can help you too." So we ended up here at the 13 steps of Bethesda Mission. And there was a guy here named Champ Clark. Champ Clark was a military man, and he ran this place like a military. And it was 8 o'clock in the morning, and they were on cleanup detail, and he was hollering, and, "All right, we gotta get the chapel cleaned up. We gotta get the kitchen cleaned up. We gotta get the dorms cleaned up. Let's get to it, let's get to it, let's get to it." And I walked up into all this, and I was like, what am I got myself into now? And I was just debating. I was kind of stuck right there. I was kind of debating. I wasn't sure if I was gonna buy into all this, applying some biblical principles to my life. I wasn't sure about all that. But you know what? I had tried everything else. And so why not try that? And I started listening to what they had to say. They said, no matter what your past is, your future is with the Lord is so much better. And you can put that past behind you. My life started getting a little better. Like the stuff that used to keep me up at night, I could actually sleep through now. The worries that used to have my mind racing were kind of calm now. And I kept on hearing this voice say, with me, all things are possible.
But hey, it's a good world today. Mr. Cecil McGregor. And I have a relationship with Jesus today. Amen. That's what my testimony is about. It's just about what he has did in my life and what he can do in someone else's life. Because if he found favor in me, he can find favor in you. He if you don't have Jesus, you don't have recovery or nothing else. And you know, it might have took us a drink or a drug or a dark alley or whatever. It might have took a jail cell sitting there contemplating what you should and shouldn't do. It might have took my parents passing away. But whatever it took, I'm here. I claim it in the name of Jesus. I'm going forward. I got cleaned up for one reason, and one reason only, for God's purpose. And I'm not going to never forget that.
Everybody in this Bible didn't have it together at first. I mean, they went through something in order to get themselves together. And it's just like us. You know, we're not perfect, but the Lord knows that because He's the one that made us. If anybody can fix us, we know our Maker can. Amen? Amen. Lord, beyond our tears, beyond our pain, beyond our darkness, Lord, there is a place that you have prepared for each and every one of us where there is no mourning. There is no sorrow, no sin, Lord, no hopelessness or shame, Lord. It's a place of peace. And we will want nothing but you, Lord. We know that this is not going to be the end of the story. But Lord, as life unravels and falls apart around us, Lord, we know that you will still hold on to us and that your love will never let go of us until we get a chance to see you face to face and tell you that we love you.
What a great story. What a great, great story. You know, isn't it amazing how God can use anybody? God can use our suffering and even our mistakes for His glory and purpose.
He can.
And look at what He's done with Cecil's life.
Absolutely, yeah. I saw Cecil yesterday, and he's just doing wonderfully, and he works at our men's shelter, as the video mentioned, and he's just a testimony to the goodness of God.
Yeah, what an amazing thing. And you work with the women's shelter. There's a women's shelter as well.
We also have a women's shelter, yes, and we had just completed a brand new building. The women moved in back in the fall, and we previously were able to house only 25 women and their children, and we've essentially doubled our capacity, so now we have room for 50 women and their children, and It's a beautiful building.
How many, who helps you? I mean, who provides the funding? There's no federal funding for this. I mean, so who are the people that provide the funding to make it possible? I saw in the video that there were clothes, so that if somebody is coming from a distressed situation off the street, they can actually put on clothes and feel good about themselves and probably get a shower but somebody's providing that. Those clothes don't come out of nowhere. They come from somewhere. Who's providing the money for that?
Everything 100% comes from individual donors and churches and businesses.
Yeah.
And then for our building campaigns, we have those donors as well, but we also reach out to foundations. We have a lot of local foundations that support us.
Yeah. Yeah, that is wonderful. You know, I think to myself oftentimes about the scores of people who call themselves Christians, as I do and you do, who go to church every Sunday but who don't even think about people who are suffering. Like right here in our country, we did a show on suffering in India, which is just such a sad thing to see the number of kids on the street and people suffering. But right here in the United States, in our own communities, there are people who are suffering who aren't doing well for whatever reason. What lands somebody in a mission?
Well, there are a number of situations that someone could fall into.
Nobody wants to be there volunteer. I mean, nobody wants that to be where they end up.
Right. So when you're talking about men and women, men have different needs than women do, of course. Most of the men that we have in our men's shelter are suffering from some type of addiction. And we do have facilities to provide just a short-term stay for men who, you know, for whatever reason, are just having a really bad time of it. And I know we're all, some of us maybe one step away from homelessness or one or two paychecks away from that. So we have men who just maybe lost their jobs or their, their marriage went awry and they just need a place to stay. And as I mentioned, most of the men though are suffering from addiction and abuse, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, and they really need to get their lives back in gear. And so They're assigned a life coach when they come in, and the life coach works with them. They can be at our shelter for up to a year, sometimes longer, whatever it takes to get them back on their feet again. And the interesting thing is, we're not just helping them overcome their addiction, we're encouraging them to have a relationship with Christ. We want change from the inside out. And we're not forcing that on them by any means, but we really feel that that's probably the largest part of recovery.
Well, it really helps people if they can see the love of Christ in action.
Absolutely,
which is
yeah.
wonderful. So if they know they're being treated kindly with kindness and mercy, it's easier for them to see Christ because they see it in you
Right.
and the people that work with you, which is wonderful. So how does somebody like Cindy Mallow get to Bethesda Mission to work there, to be Director of Development? I mean, is that something that you aspired to as a young person, or do you have a story that brought you to Christ, or that taught you about suffering and that made your heart soft to this and open to this?
Not something that I aspired to at all. Actually, my background was in music. I wanted to be a piano teacher. I taught piano for probably 27, 28 years.
Really?
Yes, and I was in the insurance business, and I got a little tired of all of the political things that you have to deal with in the corporate world. So I geared up on my students and took on a lot more students, and then I decided to quit my job, and I taught piano full time. And then at some point, I decided to just kind of, get back into the working world a little bit, and went back into the insurance business and until my son was born in 2000, and completely left the workforce and stayed home for about 9 years to homeschool my kids. And then when I considered going back to work, I found a position at a nonprofit, and it was a musical nonprofit. They would give concerts in New York City and in Harrisburg throughout the year. So I became the executive director there. So that was kind of my entrance into the nonprofit world. And they decided to take the organization back to New York City because they weren't being able to be supported in Harrisburg. So I thought, wow. And right about that time, Bethesda Mission came into my mind, and I had donated at different points along the way, and they were looking for a donor services manager, and I said to my husband, I can do that, So one thing led to another, and I got that job and just kind of moved into development along the way, and have had a wonderful time building relationships with not only people in the mission, but with donors as well. So it's been very rewarding.
So somebody hearing about your life would say, well, Cindy has lived a wonderful life,
Yeah.
Devoid of suffering and heartbreak.
Not so.
Not so.
Yeah, in 2018, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and completely knocked me off my feet because my entire life I had been healthy. Very, very little problems, barely a cold. So it was in January, and told my husband and our kids, and it was invasive, but my prognosis was good, the doctor said. So I went through 4 months of chemo, and then in June of 2018, I had a double mastectomy, and spent basically the entire year 2018 working on that, working on recovery, working on being healthy again. And God showed up during that entire time. I only missed 1 day of work, except for when I was at chemo or when I had my surgery. So not that I wasn't sick, but he just gave me the strength to get through that. And
Did your hair fall out?
yes, yeah, completely. So yeah, which for a woman, and I never really thought about it much prior to having breast cancer, but for a woman, her hair is very important to her. And just like men put a lot of their value in their job, or what they do, women, I think, put a lot of value in either their hair or their appearance, and they want to look nice. And so it's a challenge. It's really difficult. But through all of that, for the first 2 weeks after I found out, I said to God, I gave myself 2 weeks to just, mope around and be kind of in shock. And but then I said to God, what do you want me to do with this? And he said, I want you to take people along with you. So I didn't know what really that meant. So I just prayed about it and, thought about it for a while. And then I decided to write a blog, and just about my experiences.
What's your blog called?
It's Cindy Mallow. I think it's WordPress.CindyMallow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't search it often, so.
Yeah.
And it was it was healing for me. And part of it was just to let my friends know how I was doing without having to tell the story, a million times. But it was healing for me to just tell my story and associate it with Scripture and hopefully point some other people who are struggling to Christ. And through that, I still have people contact me and ask me for prayer for, that I've never met. Could you please pray for me? My husband, has cancer or whatever. And it's just been a really neat thing to watch how God can take something, what we think is bad, and use it.
Yeah, for His purpose and glory.
Yeah.
Yes. God is able to do that. And do you think it's helped give you an even better heart for the people you serve at the mission?
Yeah, it has. I've never been the kind of person that just reaches out to people for whatever reason, but it's given me a different perspective on having a heart for people and their needs and their suffering, and that has really helped me in my position. I don't work directly with our guests, but when I do get to meet them and talk to them, I have a different outlook on them, and I think it's really made a difference in me.
I think human beings have such a tendency to judge people. There are folks that say, well, you messed up and went to prison, or you made bad decisions, you got on drugs, you did, but we don't know the stories or the journeys that people have had to travel and how hard that it may have been for them. Right. Like Cecil talks about losing his parents, and not having anybody, and then kind of losing his way and getting in trouble on the streets. And I know when I pastored a church in Philadelphia, that I spoke to a woman who would come to service who was suffering from crack addiction, and she would come and ask for money and wait till the end of the service to ask people for money. And I talked with her all the time. I engaged her and we became friends. And I asked her, I said, I know I see you every Sunday, but tell me your story. And she told me how her mother had kicked her out of the house when she was 12, and she had been living on the street, surviving as best she could. She didn't get to finish school. She's certainly an intelligent person, but didn't get to finish school. And I said, my goodness, what would have happened to me? What would my life look like if I had been thrown out of my house, if I didn't have the love of two parents, and if I wasn't given all the opportunities I was given educationally and otherwise? Where would I be? What would my life look like? Right. And so I think when we have hardship and sadness and difficulties in our own lives, it softens our heart, because you didn't do anything to deserve breast cancer, and yet and still it was visited upon you. My brother passed away a year ago from cancer. He didn't do anything to get it, but it was visited to him, and he was absolutely heroic through his time of suffering. And so God is able to use our suffering for His purpose and glory. Yes. The work you do at the mission is so wonderful. It would be a blessing if more people joined in. You don't necessarily need lots of hands to come in, but if people did the best they could, if they were able to give clothes, to give money, I'm guessing, all that would be a help, wouldn't it?
Yes, it is, and we have been very blessed through the last couple years, through COVID and everything that's been going on, with our donors and their faithfulness. And every day God shows up, and whether it's through our donors, whether it's through our guests or through our staff, it's just a wonderful thing to see.
Yeah. Well, thank God for them and for what they're doing. When we return, I'll ask Cindy to share about the work of Bethesda Youth Center, the Bethesda Mission Youth Center, and how it's challenging expectations for so many young people in the city with desperate needs. Stay with us.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
I'm with Cindy Mallow of Bethesda Mission in Harrisburg, an organization helping people in need, especially those experiencing homelessness. And it's been doing it since 1914. What a special organization this is. Cindy, tell us about the work of the Youth Center, because young people, what happens to young people? How do young people get to the Youth Center?
Well, a number of years ago, we noticed the decline in the family, and we decided that we needed to do something about it. So in 19...
What do you mean by the decline in the family? You mean
kids living in, people getting divorced, a lot of the inner city kids living in one-parent homes or no-parent homes being raised by their grandparents, and we decided that we needed to help these kids, and our goal for the community center, it was started as a youth center, now it's called a community center. The goal is to have the kids not end up in our shelters someday. So this is really our answer to prevention.
Right.
And
how do you keep them from getting addicted or from going to prison? What do you do to so that's it.
Yeah, so a lot of these kids, they're the people that are in our shelters. When we were growing up, our parents were teaching us how to cook and clean and work on the car, whatever. And these kids were being taught by their parents how to do drugs. So we're seeing a lot of the kids struggling in school. So beginning at around age 7 up to age 18, we began an after-school program, and we help them with homework, and we mentor the kids. And also during the summer, we have a summer program as well. And they take field trips and just minister to the kids and mentor them, and it's just a wonderful thing to see. And the graduation rate in Harrisburg traditionally has been about 58%. Mm-hmm. And teens that are attending our community center for 2 or more years have a graduation rate of 86%.
That's great.
So we're
58% is a pretty scary low number.
It is.
And that means that nearly half, almost 1 out of 2 aren't graduating.
Right.
And those people don't just dissolve into thin air. They become an adult who doesn't have a high school degree.
Right. And we're seeing kids that are in 3rd grade that don't know how to read or count to 10. So they need help, and so we're doing that for them. When they get to high school, we have a workforce development program, and whatever they want to do with their life, if they want to go to college, if they're interested in sports, we assign people to help them, mentors to help them, and work with them, and help them to make video reels to go to college if they want to play in sports, or whatever their needs are, whether it's music, athletics, or science, whatever it is. And we're seeing really a lot of changes made in the kids, and we're supporting them by reaching their families as well. That's why we now call it a community center, because it's not just for the kids, it's for their families. And we're supporting their parents, we're supporting their grandparents in whatever they need, and building relationships with them as well, so that when they go home, they have something to go home to, and they don't just leave our facility and go home to a house that's falling apart.
Is there anything that looks like a success story that comes to mind?
There are quite a few. We've had really good success rates. We have a number of teens that have gone to college. We have one girl that graduated summa cum laude, who didn't even think she'd ever get the opportunity to go to college, and she went and she graduated, and many stories like that, and it's really rewarding to see that.
Yeah. What a blessing. Well, that's what really matters, is the capacity to help change a life. Mm-hmm. If you can reach one person and change their trajectory, that's a blessing. Right. And so that's what you get to do. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's fulfilling for you.
It is, yeah. And in 2019, we opened a brand new facility. It's a full-size gymnasium, and we raised all the money for that. Wow. And it's just really helped give a boost to the sports program that we're running. And so now we're working on renovating a building for the kids as well. So we'll have 2 buildings there to support them and be able to help parents have, maybe get their GED and things like that. So we have a lot of partners that we work with. Yeah. And so we couldn't do it without them. So it's been great.
Yeah, what a blessing, what a blessing. Our thanks to Cindy for sharing the work of Bethesda Mission, especially the outreach to women and children. It's such inspiring work, God's work indeed. If you or your church is interested in getting a tour or being connected with volunteer opportunities, get in touch with them at BethesdaMission.org. We'll be right back with our producer, Jeff Coleman. Stay with us.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
And now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Well, I want to introduce our audience to Bethesda Mission. It's an organization that I've been a part of in different ways. And every year I get to MC their banquet. and you see many of the stories like Cecil, but then you see this connection between their mentors and the story, the testimony of God's grace. So you have people who are coming before an audience of hundreds from the women's shelter, from the community center, from the men's shelter, and they're cheering from that audience because they know, in many cases, people who look very respectable, who live good suburban lives, but they have a story that they don't often talk about. And I think what's encouraging about Cecil is that everybody who comes to Christ has a story, whether you think it is dramatic or not. It is an amazing story.
Yeah, what an amazing story he has to tell, and he tells it so well. And his life is a testimony to what God can do with somebody.
Yeah.
I mean, who would have thought 25 years ago that Cecil would be doing what he's doing now?
Yeah.
You know, that there was any hope for him. There are people, I'm sure, that gave up on him years ago.
I loved your question that you asked to Cindy about whether or not she had seen the trajectory of her life. And I know many of the people in our audience are thinking, you know, I've been at this job for 25 years. What does retirement look like? And many have come to the conclusion that retirement isn't inactivity.
Right.
It is just a repositioning of your resources and time now that you have the ability not to think about the mortgage or other responsibilities like raising kids. How do you want to use the time that you have left in that maybe that last quarter of the life? And so when you have 700 some volunteers at Bethesda Mission every year, doing everything from driving a van that finds people under bridges and cold winter nights to get them blankets and coffee and food, to people who give the donation center coats and clothes that you talked about. It's an army of people driven by a single purpose and a single person.
Yeah. What an amazing, 700 volunteers.
Yeah.
That's a blessing. I mean, you don't often hear that.
Well, think about what that would be in man hours, how much it would cost to hire 700 people to deal with some of the deepest needs in a city that has great need, our capital city.
Yeah. Wow. Great story. Well, that's all the time we have for today's State of Independence. Thanks to our guest, Cindy Mallow of Harrisburg's Bethesda Mission. Take a minute at the end of the show to drop me a line in the comment box at joewatkins.org. I see every one of them, and they help me and our great team here at Lighthouse TV. Help us to know that we're equipping you to love the Lord with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. From America's first capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. Thanks so much for watching. God willing, I'll see you next week. What good work they do.
Yeah, it's Bethesda has the flagship, famous green cross out in front at the corner of 6th and Riley Streets. Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.